So I am so excited, Kinjal, to talk to you today about your role as an investor at Blockchain Capital, and then also all of the things that are kind of lighting you up about crypto at the moment. So I wonder if this is kind of maybe a bit of a roundabout way to ask you about your background, but I've had this kind of experience in crypto where a lot of the most random experiences, kind of professional and personal, that I've had in the last decade have all kind of come together to be really useful skills or experiences for kind of just like existing in Web3. So I wonder if you think about kind of what you do as an investor every day. Are there kind of really random experiences that, like, now when you connect the dots, it all makes sense?
Yeah, it's a great question, really interesting one. I think the biggest draw for me, like, into crypto, and thing that if I look back on growing up, that I think relates to my role today, is just curiosity to learn and to, like, constantly seek out new things to learn. I think, like, the investor role is one where I'm fortunate to spend a lot of my time just talking to people about new ideas or learning about new projects, and just spending a lot of my time reading and researching. And so I feel like that love of learning has kind of grown from an academic place into a more professional place. And yeah, it just makes me feel super lucky to be able to do what I do. And then I think the other piece on crypto more broadly is that it's really multidisciplinary. So I don't know if this, like, relates back to any, like, one experience, but what I can say is, like, when I was younger, I was always really torn between wanting to be a fashion designer and pursuing, like, every possible art craft I could. Like, I learned how to sew, I learned how to make, designs, I took art classes, I took pottery classes, like, you name it, I did it. And at the same time, I was also a major, history buff, and I loved math, and I
Mhm.
chose, like, a very practical path in the end. But what I love about crypto is that it feels like I can kind of pull on all the different threads that interested me and not be forced to sort of pick one role or one path. So, I can be creative, and I can have a good appreciation of history and finance and economics and psychology. And so, like, I think just this idea that I don't have to sort of just do one thing only is what I kind of love, and feels like makes me feel like this place is home.
Absolutely. I can totally relate to that feeling. And that just like thinking of those experiences and then thinking of kind of the space that you're interested in terms of, I suppose, like consumer projects and the creator economy, I can imagine like the synergy just kind of feels through the roof. And so just that touching on that idea of, in crypto, we're constantly learning, and obviously your role is to be constantly learning. So um, and I kind of feel like maybe our education system doesn't teach us how to learn as much as it could. And so, just like very practically through kind of your experience over the last few years, are there kind of things that you've picked up about when you're approaching a new area of crypto, or when you're doing due diligence, that you're just like, okay, this is a hack? Every time I'm trying to learn something new, I kind of fall back on this way of thinking or this skill.
Um, yeah, so I think there's like one framework that I use, which I think a lot of people have some sort of framework like this, but it's basically like the 5-50-5 hour framework. So it's like, how can I, if I
Mm-hmm.
spend 5 minutes on a project, um, does it sort of check the boxes for me to, you know, say that I want to go to the next level and spend 50 minutes, and then from there go to the next level and spend 5 hours. So, as you know, like in crypto, there's so many rabbit holes to go down, and you can easily spend 5 hours on everything, like every individual project. So, I think within the role, like being able to curate and, um, yeah, just kind of curate the amount of things I'm looking at has been really useful. And the main framework I do use is, spend 5 minutes on it. If I can find a compelling reason to dig deeper, whether that's differentiation in the market, or, particular technological innovation, or a founder or a team that I really, like really just love, like whatever it may be, let me sort of spend 5 minutes and then move on to the next level. I'd say, like, that's the first piece. And then the second piece is also just kind of curating your information diet, which I think is talked about a lot these days, but just going through various sources of information and saying, do I need this, or is this helpful to me, and like how is it helpful, just so you don't feel overwhelmed at the end of the day. Um,
Hmm.
and then the last piece that I would say is in crypto, we're blessed with a lot of information. And so being able to choose like the different inputs. So whether that's varying the types, so podcasts versus conversations with people versus reading, like trying to switch it up a little bit so it's not, just spent, for example, like reading for hours and hours, I think helps process the information better. So
Hmm.
yeah, those are, a few things that I employ.
Yeah, amazing. I've heard about that framework, but hearing you kind of talk about how you use it, I'm definitely going to start using it a lot more. And I think it's a really like simple strategy to use. So that's awesome. Thank you. And I wonder, in terms of, being in the space for a few years now, uh, and the people aspect being quite kind of fundamental and really dictating your experience in crypto. So I often feel like the time, I would say, since I learned about Bitcoin and Ethereum to kind of like my experience in the last 5 months, the difference has been the people, and like really actually connecting with people, having conversations like you said, and as opposed to just kind of reading and observing, really trying to engage and participate. So I wonder, for you, in terms of kind of building those real relationships with people, what did you, and I know it's kind of hard, with this COVID era that we're in, but what did you find was kind of really helpful in terms of building out those relationships?
Yeah, it's something that I struggle with still to this day, because I am an introvert, and I find
Oh my
myself
God.
in a role that requires me to be very extroverted and talk to a lot of different people. And so when
Mhm.
I say that I'm an introvert, what I mean by that is I get a lot of energy by spending time alone or just with like a few of my
Mhm.
closest friends or family, and so I've really had to like learn how to turn that on. So I guess what I would say is in the beginning, I tried to just gravitate towards people who I felt were really curious, writing about some interesting topics, or friends of friends, try to find as many connections within my like immediate circle. And I was super fortunate to start kind of my journey into crypto at Fidelity, and I had some great mentors and teachers there, who kind of brought me into the space, and I felt like I had this foundation that came from a place of talking to different folks rather than, kind of me spending my time, in a room reading about crypto. It felt like it came from a social place to
Mhm.
begin with. So super fortunate
Mm.
from that perspective. And then now what I really try to do is just constantly expand my thinking. So if somebody is tweeting about a topic that I don't know a lot about, or writing about a topic, reach out to them on Twitter. Honestly, Twitter DMs have been super useful. So that's number
Mhm.
one. Going to conferences can always be helpful as well. I know right now with COVID, it's not as frequent of a thing, but I did find going to conferences a great way to establish sort of a baseline of connection with folks, and then you can kind of build upon them from there. And then the third piece that I would say is like joining a DAO or joining a group where you can find that the relationship doesn't feel quite as uh, like maybe not force is the right word, but just something where it's like we're both working towards the same thing, or we're both into the,
Mhm.
brought into this DAO because we're really passionate about X, I think is a great way to keep just connect. So I've found that like just jumping into DAOs, or, reaching out to people because we're both really excited about like the creator economy and crypto, is a great way for us to just get started. And then um, you know, continuing to keep the conversation open, and trading ideas and asking for feedback on writing or like whatever it might be, has been a great way to make sure that it's like a very I don't know what the right word is. It's just like a very fulfilling relationship, right? Where you're going deeper
Mhm.
than just kind of like high level introductions and hellos.
Yeah, I recently heard the term. I kind of connected with some people, and it was so it was so incredible. I was literally like buzzing for hours, and I went to thank one of the people that I had a conversation with, and she said, "Oh, it's so nice to meet like-hearted people," and I thought That's really interesting, and it feels such a perfect description to describe the people in crypto and that feeling that you get. I think especially with DAOs that there is a potential to really kind of connect on a heart level, like rather than that kind of like very analytical, this is the track, like this is the outcome that we're striving for, rather more, instead it's kind of more like we are here and this is our mission, and kind of let's just start with where we are and be present and kind of keep going about it. So I wonder if we could just dig into DAOs a little bit, on the idea that they are kind of almost becoming like the heartbeat of crypto. How do you feel in terms of your experience with DAOs over the last, I would say like 6 to 12 months, it seems to really kind of popped off compared to like that experience without them as much in the previous years?
Yes. I love the idea that DAOs are like the heartbeat of crypto right now, because it really does feel that way. Where there's just like so much energy and um, I think just like new idea formation and innovation that's happening via DAOs. So I'm like really excited about, the future from that perspective. If I think back to the past few years, so of course we had like the big incident in 2016, right, with the DAO ruling, and things kind of simmered down after that. But we've started
Mm-hmm.
seeing the emergence of DAOs again through a few different frameworks, and then through DeFi really in 2018. We had a lot of these protocols come out and say that we're going to be building decentralized networks. We might not be decentralized from day one, but over time, we really want to hand off power to the community to sort of, make decisions and guide the product forward, or guide the experience. And I think the amazing thing about protocol DAOs is um, everybody who's participating in those DAOs feels super excited, passionate, insert, whatever word there, but they just like are so excited about whatever it is, right? Like whether that's Aave or
Mm-hmm.
Compound or you name it, Uniswap. Um, but these are DAOs that are operating at a mass scale. We've got like thousands of people in the discords, we've got thousands of token holders, and the governance there, I think the frameworks are going to be a little bit different than say like a smaller social DAO that might only have a couple hundred users, might be sort of still in like the earlier stages, or have like a different outcome or a different like goal in mind. So I'd say the past few years, the protocol DAOs have felt like these um, sort of majorly massive communities in the making. And the past 6 months have been all about like
Mm-hmm.
grassroots, very um, niche DAO formation across like every possible category, which is so exciting, right? Because we're trying to come up with, um, we're basically experimenting at this point where, DAOs are basically a tool. And there's many different frameworks, and you're using that framework to be able to bring together a group of people, like-minded individuals who have a shared mission. And so that can mean absolutely anything. And so we've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just been really fun these past few months. It just feels like really, really exciting, where everyone is, participating in multiple DAOs, and it's like much more social, I would say, than ever before. That was a long answer, but hopefully
Yeah.
that kind of talks through like the history of the past few years and like how it kind of feels to be participating.
Yeah, I almost feel um, kind of like blessed to have my experience just kind of like starting this year. Like a lot of people who have kind of really engaged with the crypto community on the back of the DeFi Summit last year. And so, yeah, I kind of think of crypto as social. And I would have to say it's like basically because of that experience with DAOs. And so, just like thinking about this idea of first principles and governance, how do you like, and the kind of the complete range of DAOs like you mentioned that are in the space, how do you think we go about governance when um, it has to be, well, not it has to be, but it certainly helps to be crypto native on one hand and kind of make the most of all of the possibilities and benefits of being crypto native, but then also kind of just acknowledging like the history of governance, whether it's kind of political or corporate governance, and what has kind of worked over the last few decades or hundreds of years. How do you think it's best to kind of obviously based on the intention of the DAO, but to think about how to build out these governance structures going forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, the biggest thing for me is that governance is going to be and continues to be a spectrum of choices. So I would say that on one end um, of the spectrum, you have governance where everyone is making decisions about everything. So we're talking about like
Mm-hmm.
what I call like the pure chaos model of governance, which honestly works. It works well in some of these communities where like, you could have users sitting in there debating like I'm making this up, but debating like a font choice or debating, anything really. And I
Yeah.
think I like that. I love the model where it really feels like this is a labor of love and everybody is contributing to the final product. So I think that's one model. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have probably something that looks very similar to corporate organization or corporate structures where you probably end up having a few decision makers that kind of trickle into different committees or different like sub DAOs or whatever we want to call them, and they sort of get delegated power, right? So they have the ability to make certain decisions because they were voted into a particular committee or sub DAO. And I think the reason I say that's on the other side is because it's much more hierarchical, right? We're basically saying
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about structures being super flat or hierarchical. I'm not really making any comment on the level of decentralization. I'm just saying that there's, different ways of making decisions. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think in order for DAOs to scale, especially scale from a place where there's, a couple hundred users to thousands of users, or maybe, a tiny amount of revenue versus millions of dollars sitting in a treasury or billions of dollars, I think some level of hierarchy and order is probably required. But I think then the question then becomes, how do we get checks and balances in place in the way that, say,
Mm-hmm.
like the US democracy was intended to work? Not sure if like all of our checks and balances work exactly the way that they were designed hundreds of years ago, but how do we
Mm-hmm.
design more checks and balances within existing governance system? So I don't have like the right answer, and I think this is something that we're just constantly experimenting with, but um, it's kind of like the mental model that I use, and then everything kind of fits somewhere in between those two.
Yeah, it makes me feel like this is early in the sense that there seem to be standards that like all DAOs are held to, or things that kind of keep coming up again and again, no matter the scale in terms of, DAO members or the value of treasuries. So yeah, things like decentralization, or accessibility. And I'm really interested to see how that kind of plays out, because I wonder if it's just kind of because it is so early at the moment that all of these kind of classifications haven't been determined, and it's kind of happening as it goes. But I wonder, in terms of something that I see when I kind of go onto these proposal forums and things like that, is I have noticed that a lot of the same people seem to be very they are power DAO members, I would say. And especially if you have a certain skill set that is very useful for all DAOs, kind of no matter what the mission is. I wonder if that is okay. And because, you're essentially, maybe you could think about it as a meritocracy in one sense, which is that the people with the greatest expertise in an area are the ones who always kind of not get the role, but their contribution is kind of heard, versus always kind of creating and allowing for space for people to get involved, or just for there to be kind of diversity in some sense in terms of who like what voices are heard. So how do you kind of think about that trade-off? And I don't know if you've noticed it at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say, I will be the first to say this, like I am definitely sitting in a role where, I would be probably called like one of the insiders, right? But I think what's happening to crypto right now is that there is a group of folks who are working on DAOs that are very much closely aligned to the sort of founding teams. And
Mhm.
they're really involved with the governance. They're heavy DAO users. I would say those are, I use the word in quotes because I don't mean this in a bad way, but they are kind of the insiders, right? Um,
Mhm.
and I think the challenge that comes with a DAO and with open participation is really reputation, right? A lot of these super DAO members become super DAO members because they've garnered that reputation where they're
Mhm.
engaged, they're participating, their proposals are valued, their contributions are heard, very, very loudly within the community. And a lot of that is probably driven by the history that they've sort of built up over time, the level of effort that they could, put into the work that they're doing, all of the above. But and so I think it's definitely holds merit there, and like you said, it's probably more of a meritocracy, but at the same time, what I really struggle with is, um, at the end of the day, are these DAOs being run by, like, the same 50 or 100 people? And if that
Mhm.
is the case, then how do we encourage, not just new participants in the governance process, but participants to be able to sort of rise up through that process without necessarily knowing, like, the right people or being in those right
Mhm.
conversations or, whatever that might look like. So, um, we talk a lot about protocol politicians and the emergence of
Mhm.
protocol politicians. I would say the super DAO users are effectively protocol politicians, and we're going to continue to see more of these emerge. But then the question really does become that at the end of the day, like we want, or at least I want, more people represented in these DAOs, and I want more diversity, right? I want more women. I want more people of color, minorities. I want these DAOs to be representative of the markets that they're trying to serve, right? DeFi started out with this
Mhm.
very big idea that we were going to be serving emerging markets with open accessibility around the world. And I still think that's possible to this day, but I'm not sure it's reflected in the users for all of them. This is a big generalization, so for some of them maybe, but I think there's room to sort of grow there. And so how do we make sure that when we're building this uh, new sort of system, we're making sure we allow for just greater diversity and accessibility in that process?
Yeah. And do you think that that diversity, it might be kind of like a two-pronged approach, but I wonder if it is partly DAO tools, like the tools that are used and employed within a DAO that allows for that. And then also this idea of kind of societal or cultural norms and what, I think Vitalik said that for something to be legitimate, it's important for the community to believe to deem it as legitimate. And so I wonder just like that role that cultural and societal norms like play in DAOs, and is it can we do this from just like a community cultural perspective, which is just like set this intention and find a way to stick with it, or is it the meshing of these two things where you really need kind of the technological aspect to almost like enforce it, or like you said, have checks and balances?
Yeah, I think I'm a big believer of like the checks and balances. And the reason being is that I think intention is amazing, but unless you have someone to hold you to your word, it can be very difficult to kind of
Mm-hmm.
go back and say, like, this is how, we were kind of held to our intention. So I think from that perspective, it's very much hopefully that we can find the technology or a balance between the human aspect and the technological aspect to make sure that we get to this world. But on the DAO tooling front, I think like the biggest area for me right now is onboarding new users that I think is lacking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not so much onboarding new users from like a product perspective or like as a token holder. It's really onboarding new users into how to do governance. So how do you contribute to different proposals? How do you write a proposal? um, Sort of what requirements or what qualifications do you think one might need to, think of uh, writing XYZ proposal? And it's not so much that we want to like go and make it super standard and, create new boxes for everybody to check. It's just how do we do this in a way where for folks who might have never done something like this before, which is most of us, like how do we move forward in a
Hmm.
way that allows them to grow, and doesn't feel like a super daunting task? Because I think that's the main thing, is coming in from the outside, you might not fully know like how to get started or who to talk to. And sometimes the communities can be really just, confusing. There's a lot of things happening at once. So I think solving for that onboarding process will be really important. And I think DAOs are also realizing this just from like a talent, acquisition perspective. Like
Hmm.
there's so much work that needs to be done, for these DAOs. They have all these RFPs out, and there's just like a lot to be done. But there's a little bit of a mismatch in terms of, I think, finding big pools of talent. So hopefully we can do that matching process better in the future, and also make people, a little more comfortable with getting onto into the DAO world.
Yeah. And so when I think of kind of that talent pool, it immediately makes me think of diversity again, like you mentioned. And I'm sure there are many studies, I can't quote any of them, that, reinforce the idea that when you have multiple varying views looking at a problem, the outcomes are very different from having very similar people looking at the same problem. So I wonder, in terms of kind of that space, crypto wide, but also with, and maybe linking it to DAOs, I am absolutely aware of Komaribi, and I would love to maybe hear about what kind of drove you to, I guess, take action, because crypto is really interesting in the sense that you can take action very quickly. And so that's that time space between an intention and bringing something to reality is very short compared to kind of the physical or the tech world that many of us came from. And well, everyone's from the physical world, but tech in particular. And so I wonder what kind of what that process was like for you in terms of, feeling strongly about diversity and then, taking next steps for you.
Yeah, so I think it comes from like, it came from two places. So first was, I've just
Mm-hmm.
been working in the space, investing in the space for quite some time, and I didn't feel like I was meeting as many female founders in crypto as I had hoped to, or as I imagined I would. Um, and it was interesting because I created such a great group of female investors that I looked up
Mm-hmm.
to, and I worked with, and I chatted with, and became friends. Um, and I just felt like having that community around me was just really comforting over the past few years as I got my feet in the investing world. And I wasn't really seeing that for female founders, right? Not at least in the same regard. And so I started doing this thing, um, that I just call female founder office hours. So every month I just host open office hours for anybody who wants to chat, at any stage of their company. And that kind of, snowballed into Komaribi with a few other folks. So I was talking to Ian, who is co-founder at Syndicate Protocol, and we got linked up with She 256, and then Women in Blockchain, which is founded by Mansi Vora, both of which are great organizations to kind of promote, similar ideas in the space. And we said, how about we take this to the next step and create a DAO to actually go out and fund women? Um, and I think it's so important because I think talking about diversity and bringing about
Mm-hmm.
awareness is one thing, and then actually giving, uh, in this case, USDC to a bunch of women is very different, right? And we're basically saying, like, you know, not only do we want to see more female founders in the space, female and non-binary founders in the space, but I also believe that this is going to lead to better outcomes. We're going to have,
Mm-hmm.
I think, just really strong projects come out of this, with exceptional talent, and I'm really excited to see where this goes. So that's kind of where the idea was born. And I think, like, moving forward, what I would love to see is over time, our portfolio can kind of create that similar network I was just talking about with female investors that I found,
Mm-hmm.
but they can have it with one another. So hopefully our portfolio, can lean on one another for support, for advice, for guidance, whatever it may be, and we can be a part of that as well. So the DAO now has 35 members, all across the entire space. We've got builders and operators, founders, investors, you name it. And everyone's just really excited about this mission. I think doing it in the DAO structure allowed us to act really quickly, which is what you mentioned as well,
Mhm.
of just being able to take an idea and turn this into a reality in a matter of weeks, which was really cool.
Yeah. And so, for someone like myself who doesn't really have a deep understanding of how a traditional VC fund would work compared to a DAO, and so I wonder if you could just run me through whether there are similarities or differences between the members of a DAO and who would be like the partners in a fund.
Yeah, so I think the main difference actually does come down to what I would call governance, effectively. So
Hmm.
in a traditional venture fund, you have limited partners who are contributing capital, and the general partners or the GPs are basically making investment decisions. So the limited partners are saying, you know, here you go, GP, we're giving you X amount of capital, and you can go and invest it and act as a fiduciary. Um, and then they kind of work with the portfolio companies. So in that instance, blockchain capital is the GP, for example. With the Komorebi DAO, what we're really saying is that this is now an investment collective. So we have all of our, LPs are basically in the DAO. We're all making collective decisions around what we invest in. Everybody is contributing a certain amount of, capital, and it's very sort of flat in that regard, right? So it's purely based on a vote. Everybody votes on investments. Um, and there isn't this process of delegation where, they're delegating the ability to invest into the hands of a few. It's really just done by the entire group.
Wow. And so I wonder how important it is to kind of get alignment with those DAO members at the outset, so that making those decisions collectively isn't kind of like a very drawn out process every time if you're kind of coming to a decision collectively on every investment, or is the point to kind of have that diversity? But I get, and I wonder with this in particular, just like this idea of championing women and non-binary founders, and being one of the first one of their first checks in the space. So does it help to have like everyone mission aligned, or does like diversity of participants and members who aren't maybe mission aligned like increase the anti-fragility of the DAO?
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. I think for this sort of what I'll call V1 of Komorebi, which is our first initial launch, it was really important to us to get everyone to be mission aligned, because we really wanted folks who are sitting around the table who felt like this is a major need in the market. We really want more female founders, and then we were all sort of aligned on a process as well. So there's various levels of engagement across the entire DAO. So everybody can be involved in the entire process. But some members choose to be more involved versus others when it comes to, like doing diligence or whatever it may be. So I think like having that expectation set from the beginning was really important. And then I think the second piece that was important to us was making sure that everybody was crypto native, because we really wanted folks who would, kind of have been past that aha moment of crypto and really understood that we were excited about crypto for, the many reasons that we were excited about it and come from different perspectives. So for this iteration, for example, we don't have any DAO members that are non crypto specific, either, operators or investors. And I think that was really just to make sure that everybody can focus and zero in on the fact that, we're trying to find female and non-binary crypto founders. So I think for the first iteration, absolutely was important. I think moving forward as the DAO grows, we hope it can include bigger, or bigger as in more people, more diverse perspectives, and maybe to a certain extent, kind of expanding beyond this first version in terms of mission alignment would be cool as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny, this idea of obviously governance just keeps coming up in kind of crypto more broadly, but especially in DAOs. And for me, when I hear the term governance, I think of the idea of agency. And so just that like an an individual person is empowered with a sense of agency to contribute and to have an opinion on something, which I think traditionally, like for me at least in the physical world, I feel like I've really been programmed to outsource that sense of agency. And so it can be quite a shift going into crypto and particularly into DAOs where people want your opinion, where there is kind of almost an expectation to participate, and that is a feature, not a bug. And so I wonder, just in terms of this idea of kind of not maybe strengthening people's sense of agency, what would you say are like the little things that someone who is a DAO member could do to kind of strengthen that muscle?
Yeah, it's a interesting question in the regard of when I think of agency, I think of um, basically like an entrepreneurial mindset, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
everybody in the crypto community has that, is either required to have some degree of like an entrepreneurial mindset where it's like if it's not there, build it. If nobody's saying it, speak it. If it's a problem, raise your hand. And I think we've often seen the opposite in corporate structures from a particular sense where you kind of get conditioned to not disagree, or to like not ruffle feathers. And I mean, it depends on which corporate structure you're in, or where you're working, but it is pretty common, I would say, in larger organizations where you kind of weigh the cost benefit of like, okay, if I disagree in this one particular instance, like, does it matter? Are things going to move forward anyways? Like, is this going to hurt my career? Who knows? Like, who knows
Mm-hmm.
the number of decisions that are running through your head? And so what I found in crypto to be super useful for me is two things. One is like just acknowledging the fact that like your opinion matters, and telling yourself to just kind of have that faith in like yourself and your own abilities. And then the second is being able to form an opinion really quickly is a superpower. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
to say to form an opinion and then like hold by it, without any ability to like take in new thoughts and perspectives. It's just, can you
Mm-hmm.
form an opinion based on some of the facts in front of you, and then sort of, reevaluate as needed on an ongoing basis. And so it's part of like the investor muscle as well of just having conviction in something. And I think having conviction in something early is like one of the most just like it's one of the most compelling things you can do for your career. And we've seen it in crypto repeatedly, right? People having conviction
Mm-hmm.
in NFTs, and having conviction in DeFi, and having in Bitcoin, Ethereum, like you name it. Like sticking to your gut has paid off really well, but it is like super challenging to do. So I would just say like try to exercise that muscle of conviction early on. Write out your rationale for why you agree with something or why you disagree with something. Like engage in discourse privately or publicly if you're not ready to share publicly, and like continue to think with like a bias towards action. So if you don't think of yourself in like a traditional entrepreneurial role, that's okay, but like if there are ways to add that to your day to day, like how can you do that? Whether that's participating in a project, or the way that you actively manage your portfolio of NFTs, like whatever it may be, like think about how you can be in control of it, and run a process or make decisions accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. Hearing you talk about kind of that superpower, it definitely makes me think of that kind of Jeff Bezos line. I think it was him who said, have strong opinions loosely held,
Mhm.
which I feel like is crypto all over
Mhm.
uh, because a lot of the when you essentially are making bets, like you are putting down money in a lot of ways, or there is some kind of financial instrument at play. And so yeah, that's really interesting. And I wonder, just like talking about conviction, how much for you personally is feels intuitive versus kind of analytical?
Yeah, okay. So this is like the ultimate question, right? I am like logical brain, super, I need the facts in front of me. I love being able to back something up with data. Um, and I've talked about this publicly before, but I'm also like very risk averse. Like I do not come from a place where
Okay.
like I've had a scarcity mindset growing up, and with my investments, it's been a real learning curve for me to just get more comfortable with taking bets and like building up that conviction in my personal portfolio. Um, and so when it comes to the analytical versus the intuitive, what I've found is that you have to have both. And over
Hmm.
time, the intuitive feels much more, it just feels easier to lean on because you have like a, maybe there's things that I haven't invested in, but I can look back and say, oh, if I had invested, like it would have done well, or maybe it wouldn't have done well for XYZ reason. But you can kind of go back and see um, the feedback on like whatever it is, whatever investment decision I might have made. And I think like with traditional venture, a lot of the feedback cycles are 5+ years or 8 years when a company goes public.
Hmm.
With crypto, you find out much more quickly if a particular liquid token is performing well in the market. That being said, it's still an early stage project, but there is a little bit more of like an immediate feedback cycle. So I found myself to just like continue to test my intuition in the sense of um, don't disregard my gut or what, over the past few years I've been able to sort of build up over time, but also
Hmm.
needing some analytical thinking and rationale to back me up as well. And I think like the balance of the two is like a great way to meet in the middle. But I know a lot of investors who are on like both ends of the spectrum as well. So
Yeah, yeah. And just when you're talking about kind of your past and coming from like a scarcity mindset, and then, what we just covered about everyone having an opinion, and also this idea in crypto, which is unlike outside of crypto, I would say, where, even kind of I bring everything back to education because so many people share that experience, but, whether you're in school or you're in university and only 3 people in a class of 100 can get an A. And so just like that idea is really programmed into us quite strongly. And so we think that there can only be a few winners. And for me, that model has been kind of tipped upside down with crypto in the sense that I feel like there is enough space for everyone to win, kind of financially, with their purpose, with kind of whatever they're aligned with. And it really is this abundance mindset. So, how do you think about what the potential is, when people kind of take on that entrepreneurial owner mindset and, have skin in the game one way or another? What is kind of the potential for people, quite broadly as a community and, hopefully as a society to win?
yeah, I think winning within the context of crypto is it's just like encouraged on every front. Like we're all kind of in this,
Mm-hmm.
it's like crypto against everyone, right? It feels like that sometimes where it's like it's us or them. And so yeah, we think like, we like everyone in crypto is very much of this abundance mindset, I think. There are multiple winners in crypto. And I think part of that is because we're early, to be totally honest. Like there is
Mm-hmm.
definitely an asymmetric like upside of being in any industry this early where you are going to be able to see a lot of winners. But then I think the other piece is like the beauty of the internet. So while like on in school, maybe there were only a few people that could get A's, what I've seen online is that there are thousands of people that can build businesses, millions of people that can build businesses, right? Looking at things like Shopify or influencer platforms, right? Like everybody can win. People can win creating like the most niche products that you never would have imagined. There were thousands of users. So it just comes back to this idea of like your 100 true fans or your 1,000 true fans, and this idea that you can win with like a very small but passionate audience online. And I think crypto just takes that even further and saying, we're changing the game of like how you work, of how people make money, and are doing it in a way where hopefully it's not just sort of the top 1% or 2%, but it's like the long
Mm-hmm.
tail that really gets the benefit. And I think we're seeing that with like play to earn games right now. I think we're seeing it with like just the like experimentation across different social DAOs and the way that those tokens are sort of like working with their community to create different forms of value. Like there's just so many different ways I think to take that model and take it even further. So I'm super excited about this abundance mindset, and I think that having it really, um, it's it's much more, I think, encouraging and just like opportunistic as a way of like living and working. And I think that there's a lot of great aspects of crypto that encourage it. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, I am also really excited. And even just kind of touching on the creator economy as an example of a space where you really feel the potential of crypto enabling and empowering people, kind of financially and just as creators. I think it's really interesting for me, my definition of a creator coming from, social media platforms in particular to crypto has really broadened, because I'm starting to think that creator is almost a label that we might start to use. I would love for us to start to use instead of kind of whatever label we use to currently associate with our work, so that everyone in some sense is a creator. And it just, again, it's like that ownership mindset, because I don't know, there's just like something about that word is so empowering for me. And I wonder, just in terms of the timing of, social media, web 2.5, I think it's called, so like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, all that sort of stuff, YouTube especially, and so I feel like there are a couple of things happening which make this maybe a perfect storm, which is, so like social media platforms, the internet just like scaling, tech companies maturing in terms of the products that and the platforms that are spinning out for creators. And then you kind of get crypto come along. And I almost, in my mind, I imagine, I know that in tech, people talk a lot about bundling and then unbundling. So like Craigslist being the great example of like bundling everything together, and then all of these next wave of tech startups unbundling Craigslist. And so I wonder, now I kind of think of like the internet as giving us the ability to scale, so to reach, to have 2 million subs on a YouTube channel, or, many 10 million followers on TikTok, literally. And now I think about crypto as kind of taking that scale and being able to niche back down, like really quite specifically niche back down to maybe only finding, like you said, the 100 true fans, like, so going from 1,000 to 100, and that actually being enough for you to kind of feel the impact of that long tail win. How do you kind of think about consumer, like that consumer space and timing with crypto, and just maybe just like throwing it forward into the future, what that could look like?
So I think two trends that have been on the rise for the past, 5, 7 years is, so the first is personalization. So I think every
Mm-hmm.
massive platform out there has been trying to personalize everything, right? The advertisements that you get, the products that you
Mm-hmm.
get, like the, to the degree that they can personalize while still making it, possible from a product like revenue perspective, companies have been doing that. So I think that's the first piece that ties in really well here. And then I think the second is turning digital goods into an item people want to buy. So like the subscription, I think, model has um, gone even further in the past few years, and I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean there. But I think the combination of saying, we want things that are personalized and also people are willing to pay for digital items. Those two
Mm-hmm.
trends, I think, come together really nicely with like what crypto can do and what creators are doing moving forward. So, on the personalization front, I think creators having 100 true fans or whatever that number might be allows them to have like a more, I think, more fulfilling and like rich conversation with their fans without all the other noise that comes on different platforms that advertise
Mm-hmm.
really broadly. So, for example, if I'm like really, really excited about, you know, Lululemon or something like that, which I am. I love wearing Lululemon. Like there is a whole group on Facebook that's just devoted to, reselling Lululemon or yeah, reselling, buying, whatever. And there's thousands of people in there. And would you imagine that like just a group dedicated to literally just buying and selling leggings of this one particular brand has so many people that are excited about it? And yet it does. And so I think the internet has already proved out that personalization has a much bigger market than potentially people thought. And now it's just how can
Hmm.
we leverage that to create even better experiences for our fans. And then when you pair that with the fact that people are now paying um for like newsletter subscriptions, right? Like 10 years ago, people would not have paid for 10 different Substacks. I don't think that really, like, I
Hmm.
think that idea would have been very differently received. So we've got like newsletter subscriptions, we have got gaming items, which have been purchased for quite a long time now. Um, we have like virtually everything, right? Everything is for sale. And so, like, you have this idea of people selling things and needing something physical, and I think that's gone. I think we're okay and happy to receive digital items, which is uniquely what crypto enables, I think, is, digital assets. And then at the same time, the ability to reach a small audience, but deliver like value and be able to really create like this mini economy. And so I think the pairing of those two means the future of crypto is about to become more and more integral in how the internet works, how like the so-called metaverse works. Um, it's just going to be really important infrastructure. So I think 20 years from now or 10 years from now, we're going to see a world where crypto infrastructure powers a lot of the internet economy, and it does so in a way that's not so in your face, right? Where I don't think in 20
Hmm.
years people are going to be like, hey, did you buy that NFT? I don't really think NFT will be very commonly used as a part of vocabulary. I think it'll just be
Hmm.
assumed that things can be an NFT or will be an NFT to a certain degree.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm now thinking about, I know there are so many Facebook groups with tens of thousands of people in them, like you said, who are interested in a very specific, who are part of a very specific interest group. And so I wonder, even just thinking about the platforms and kind of the tools that are available, is there anything on your kind of radar, or maybe even like a gap where you see, you would love for someone to create the X for Y kind of situation?
Um, that's a great question. I think this is starting to take off right now, but the like X to earn category is going to be huge in
Hmm.
crypto, and we've obviously already have like play to earn, and that's been around for a while. And I think we're starting to get the participate to earn, of course, right? With like yield
Hmm.
farming, like that's considered participation. But I think like the next iteration of what this could be is going to be much bigger, where people will be um, like, building digital brands from scratch, basically, and earning like the value. So a really like it's a DAO, but an interesting example of this would be like Party DAO, and they just launched Party Bid, which is
Hmm.
this really cool product, right? And um, all the DAO members are holders of the Party token, and this was just kind of born from the ground up, and they built like this product. So I think we're going to see a lot of interesting examples where users or groups individually come together to do X and then they earn Y. And it's going to be a great way, I think, to broaden the audience of different crypto products and platforms. So it's not, quite, it just grows the pie as a whole, but gets people in without them having to spend money, but rather contribute their time and effort in order to receive value. So I think we're going to continue to see that category explode, and I don't think we're even at like the 2% of what it could do. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Thinking about Axie Infinity and thinking we're at kind of like 2% is really amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
um, so I wonder if we could maybe wrap up with like a kind of like a we're going to make it moment, which is, I wonder if in the last, even kind of more recently, like 12 months, you've just had a moment where personally it just meant a lot for you and you felt really kind of, extremely positive and optimistic about the future of crypto.
Yeah, I love that question. I think and I think this moment was, controversial, but to me, when Beeple's art was sold for $69 million, um,
Hmm.
and the conversations that ensued around it, I felt so just I think just so excited about the prospect of where we could go from here. Just in the fact that NFTs were not just sort of this inner circle thing. They were becoming more mainstream. And then with Metacoven and the message behind the purchase and sort of the methodology that he operates with, and um, the work that Beeple has put in over the past many years to get to this point, I just think all of it made me feel just really warm and excited. And it felt like we were in the beginning of something really, really big. And I think so far that's proven to be true. So I'd say that's like a big mainstream moment. And then I would say personal moment would be just like the formation of Komaribi and how quickly we were able to get it up off the ground and how much support there was from the community. I just felt really grateful and glad to know that I think our community is one that's very open and welcoming to just about everyone, and pretty much any idea. You just have to say it and raise your hand,
Mm-hmm.
and I think people will come forward and support. And so I think there's just been a lot of positivity around that I'm really grateful for, and made me feel like I'm gonna make it. So
Yeah, that's beautiful and so awesome, and I can totally relate to those feelings, especially with the Beeple sale. I think it's so, yeah, it just gives you. I don't know how many times my faith in humanity has been restored by crypto, but that was definitely one of those moments.
absolutely.
So, Kinjal, where can people find you on Twitter? Because I love your Twitter account. I learned so much from you on Twitter. And honestly, I feel like you were one of the first Twitter accounts that I followed in crypto. And I feel like it was really valuable for me in terms of like orienting me in crypto towards, I don't know, just like things that really mattered, and kind of not getting, I guess, like being excited and not getting kind of swayed by hype, and remembering why we're here and what this is all about. So thank you for that. And yeah, if you could just let us know.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you can find me at underscore Kinjal Shah, and my DMs are open, so feel free to reach out whenever.
Awesome. Thank you so
Thank
much. I
you.
so appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.